Mini Lesson 8, Responding and Making Connections to Texts. When we're doing realistic fiction, a story using made-up characters but could happen in real life, realistic fiction stories are often about experiences that readers can easily relate to. When we read realistic fiction stories, we can develop different types of connections to the text.
Think about some of your favorite books. Characters in a book may remind you of people you know, your best friend, your parents, or a neighbor. And sometimes the things that happen in a book may remind you of things that have happened to you. As you read, personal connections can make a book more meaningful. Relating to the characters and events in a story can give you a better understanding of the meaning of the story. As you watch this fairy tale, think about how the characters in the story are like people and events in your life.
Once upon a time, a traveler walked into town on a cold, snowy night. He knocked on the doors of all the people, asking for a slice of bread to eat.
Not a slice of bread or anything else. We have nothing to share.
They shut their windows and doors to him, and no one gave him a bite to eat. Tired and hungry, he looked around the town square for a place to rest. He found an iron pot sticking out from the snow. He smiled and built a fire for the pot. Then he pulled out a smooth stone from his pocket and placed it into the pot. And he called out to the villagers, "The winter night is cold. We could all use a good meal. I will make enough soup for everyone with my magic stone." A little girl was drawn out by the thought of tasty soup.
What are you doing?
"Making stone soup. It would be even better if I had an onion." And the girl said,
If I get an onion, will you share with me?
"Of course," said the traveler. By now, the old woman was curious as well.
What's all the noise?
The traveler replied, "We're making stone soup. It would be just right if I had a sprinkle of salt."
I have a bit of salt, but you must share.
"Of course," he replied. Soon people were coming out with carrots and potatoes, a cabbage, and even a ham bone. And all of the food was thrown into the pot. There was enough for everyone, and the villagers all ate together, and laughed together and danced together all evening.
Now that we have watched the fairy tale, Stone Soup, let's take a closer look at the characters and story and compare them to our lives. The traveler in this story asks for food and the people slam their doors. Have you ever asked for something and had someone turn you down? Maybe you had to ask your brother to borrow his baseball glove. Or maybe you asked a group of kids if you could play with them and they said no. How do you think it felt for the traveler to hear no again and again? What would you have done? The traveler tells people that the magic in a stone will make a wonderful soup. Then he convinces each person to bring one ingredient in exchange for some of the soup. The ingredients they combine make up the entire soup. Separately, they have little, but altogether they have plenty. Have you ever had a clever way of getting what you wanted? Maybe you offered to help someone in order to borrow something. Maybe you swapped a trading card or food item that you didn't want for something you did want. Sometimes it's hard to get people to believe in your idea, even if you think it will help them. The traveler had a creative way of getting the ingredients for the soup that fed the whole neighborhood. As you read, personal connections can make a book more meaningful. You can relate the characters and stories to your own life.
Today we're going to revisit the mentor text, Jalapeno Bagels, and think about the text-to-self, text-to-world, or text-to-next connection to Pablo's story. Realistic fiction stories can make us think about our own lives or the world we know. When something in a story we are reading makes us think about our own lives, this is known as a text-to-self connection. Maybe your father owns a bakery or a store. Or maybe you had to come up with an international day and bring a special food that represents your country. A text-to-self is connecting the text to your own personal experiences. It could be a memory, an experience, or something you already know that you have schema on. Text-to-self is usually a big popular one for students to use. When you talk about the surface of connections, you might have just connected with a character about how they felt, and you felt the same way too. But I like it when we see deeper connections, and we actually list the page where we can really have empathy for that character and explain in detail about how we felt that way when this happened to us. You don't want to just say, I feel sometimes sad too, just like that character did. Why? Get deeper into that experience and how you can relate to that character. Deeper meaning. A text-to-world is relating a text to events that have occurred in our community, our world, or in history. Maybe there's something in the news or current events, or even historical events that happened that you can connect to. Maybe you're reading something about slavery. And because there's slavery that even happens in these days. And maybe that you can connect it with Abraham Lincoln. I know you didn't live during that time, but you know you have some schema on Abraham Lincoln. Text-to-text is making connections to texts that we have read, viewed, or heard. Maybe about some other books or articles, movies or shows or songs that you can connect to what you're reading. This is our reading response rubric. We want to be able to get 4s. Remember that proud peacock? Well, we want to be able to know that we had thorough knowledge and understanding when we read that story. We'll be able to come up with the central theme or idea or message. We're able to understand the characters, the setting, the plot, which are the events. That story mountain that we've always talked about. Are you able to come up with some connections? You show evidence on that deep connection that you have with the characters. Can you show text-to-text, text-to-self, or text-to-world? And when you write about this message, it has to be clear and specific. When we make these connections, we can write about them in our readers' notebooks and use this handout as a guide in developing and writing quality responses to our connections. When we reread the story, Jalapeno's Bagels, try to make those text-to-self connections and text-to-world connections. When we make connections, we connect to what we read to your own life. It may have happened to you, a friend, or maybe you have read about it somewhere else. When we talk about Jalapeno's Bagels and the close-knit that he has with his family and his parents and how much he adores them, and he wanted to pick out a piece of food that represented both of his parents, I automatically make a connection to my own family and how I have such a deep connection with my sister Shannon. She's the princess I always tell you about. Shelley, the adventurer, and Scott, my little brother. I have a very deep connection with them when we go on our trips to Myrtle Beach with my parents. And we have a lot of adventures together. And it seems like in Jalapeno's Bagels, our friend Pablo has many wonderful stories to share about his own family. And right then and there, I just made a text-to-self connection. We are going to be writing in our fiction notebooks, not just about Jalapeno's Bagels, but we're going to be responding to your reads today and being able to make a to text to self connection, a text to world connection, or text to text connection. And you want to be able to write a nice response, remembering to use that rubric. Remember, we all want to try to be proud peacocks. When making connections, we further develop our critical thinking skills and enhance our enjoyment of the story. So now get into your reads, and you are going to get into your groups and share your reads and create a rubric. Create a reading response by showing how you understood the story, being able to connect to the story, and making sure that we're using that proper language and organization, using commas and periods and capitals, and create a proud peacock reading response on your connection to the story. You can use text to text, text to self, text to world, but be very specific, be very deep with your connections. All right, get into your groups and enjoy your reads today.